Well, well, well. Sit yourself down, Buttercup, because Grandma's about to tell you about the time I accidentally started a neighborhood revolution with nothing but dirt under my fingernails and the audacity of a 10-year-old who didn't know any better. And before we get started, do your old grandma a favor. Hit that subscribe button down there. My eyesight's not what it used to be, but I can still see if you don't do it. And smash that like button too. Want me to tell your mother about that time you said vegetables were optional? Now, where was I? Oh yes.
This all happened in the summer of 1963. I was 10 years old, had scraped knees, wild hair that my mama couldn't tame with a brush and prayer, and absolutely no business doing what I did. But sometimes, honey, the best things happen when we've got no business doing them. We lived in a little house on Maple Street, and when I say little, I mean you could hear your daddy sneeze from 3 rooms away. We had this magnificent oak tree out front that your great-grandfather planted the year I was born. That tree was like the neighborhood watchdog, except it didn't bark, it just judged you silently with its branches. Now next door lived the Kowalskis, Mr. and Mrs. Kowalski. Bless their hearts. They were these wonderful Polish folks who'd seen more history than our whole town library combined. Mrs. Kowalski could make pierogi that would make angels weep with joy, and I'm not exaggerating. One time I saw Mr. Patterson from down the street literally cry into his plate. He said it was allergies, but we all knew better. Mr. Kowalski was this quiet, sturdy man with hands that looked like he'd been arm wrestling tree trunks his whole life. Worked in the steel mill for 30 years. His lungs sounded like our old screen door, all creaky and wheezy. That summer, he got real sick. So sick that Mrs. Kowalski kept her rosary beads in her apron pocket instead of her dresser drawer, if you know what I mean. Now, the Kowalskis had this garden. Oh, honey, this wasn't just any garden. This was the Garden of Eden's successful cousin. Tomatoes the size of your head, green beans that could win beauty contests, and zucchini that I swear grew 3 inches overnight. My mama used to joke that the Kowalskis whispered sweet nothings to their vegetables.
They shared everything they grew, every single thing. Our whole street ate like royalty because of that garden. Mama used to say, the Kowalskis have hearts as generous as their harvests, and then she'd make me write them a thank you note in my best cursive. You know, cursive, that ancient language we used to write before emojis. But that summer, with Mr. Kowalski sick in bed, that garden started looking like my bedroom after I'd been too busy to clean it for a week. Weeds everywhere. The tomatoes were drooping like they'd just heard bad news. The beans were going unpicked, getting all tough and stringy. It was a catastrophe in vegetable form. I'd see Mrs. Kowalski standing at her kitchen window, and let me tell you, I know that look. That was the same look Mama gave our living room after Christmas morning. Just defeated, overwhelmed, sad. Mrs. Kowalski was too proud to ask for help and way too exhausted from taking care of her husband to do it herself. One evening, I was on our front porch with Mama, shelling peas. Now, shelling peas is about as exciting as watching paint dry, but it gave you time to think, and think I did. I asked Mama, why doesn't anybody help Mrs. Kowalski? Mama stopped mid-shell, looked at me with those eyes that could see right through your skull into your thoughts, and said, well, honey, sometimes people wait to be asked instead of just doing what needs doing. Then she dropped this wisdom bomb on me. She said, your grandpa used to say, a good neighbor doesn't wait for the storm to pass. They help build the shelter.
Now, I don't know if you've ever had an idea hit you so hard you can't sleep, but that's what happened to me. I laid in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, counting sheep, counting cows, counting everything but sleep. All I could think about was that garden and Mrs. Kowalski's sad face. So the next morning, I did something either very brave or very stupid. Jury's still out on which. I woke up before the sun. Me, the child who thought anything before 9 a.m. was a crime against humanity. I put on my rattiest clothes, the ones with holes that Mama kept threatening to turn into cleaning rags, and I snuck out like a tiny, vegetable-loving ninja. I tiptoed to the Kowalski's garden and just started working, pulling weeds, straightening stakes, talking to those tomatoes like they were my personal therapy group. "You can do it, Mr. Tomato. Stand up straight. Show some pride." My hands got absolutely filthy. I'm talking dirt under every fingernail, mud on my face, grass stains on my knees that would make Mama consider just throwing the whole child away and starting over. But you know what? It felt good. There's something magical about morning dew and bird songs and the smell of fresh earth. It's better than any of that meditation stuff people do now. I was out there about an hour, really getting into the zone, when I heard the back door creak. I looked up, and there was Mrs. Kowalski in her housecoat, hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face like Niagara Falls. My heart dropped to my muddy shoes. I thought, oh no, I'm trespassing. I'm going to get arrested. I'm going to be the first 10-year-old in jail for aggressive gardening. But instead, this tiny Polish woman came down those steps faster than I'd ever seen her move. And honey, she wasn't fast on a good day. And she grabbed me up in a hug that squeezed the air clean out of my lungs. She smelled like coffee and lavender soap and kindness. She said something in Polish that sounded beautiful, but could have been anything from thank you to you crazy child, what are you doing? Then in English she asked, why you do this, Dziecko? That's Polish for child, and she always called me that. I shrugged, suddenly feeling shy as a mouse, and mumbled, it needed doing, Mrs. Kowalski. That woman smiled through her tears and said, you come, I make you breakfast. Now I tried to say no. Mama always taught me not to impose. But Mrs. Kowalski had that same superpower all grandmas have, selective hearing when we say no to food. She made me scrambled eggs with cheese that melted like silk and gave me the thickest slice of bread with butter and her homemade strawberry jam. That jam, sweet pea, that jam was proof that heaven exists, and sometimes it comes in a mason jar. We sat at her little kitchen table with the checker tablecloth, and she told me stories about Poland, about teaching her own children to garden, about how Mr. Kowalski had planted every seed with such hope when they first came to America. Her voice got all soft and wobbly, and I understood then that gardens aren't just about vegetables. They're about memory and love and home. When I finally trudged back to my house, Mama was on the porch with her arms crossed. I thought I was done for, but she was smiling. Turns out Mrs. Kowalski had already called her. Mama knew where I'd been the whole time. She just let me think I was being sneaky.
Parents, they let us think we're so clever. But here's where it gets good. The next morning, I went back to keep working, right? And there was Mr. Patterson from 3 houses down, already there, weeding another row. I thought maybe I was still asleep and dreaming. He looked at me, tipped his hat, and said, heard what you did, kiddo. Figured I'd help out. Then Mrs. Chen showed up with proper stakes for the tomatoes. Then Tommy, this teenager from across the street who I thought was way too cool to ever notice me, came by after school to water. Pretty soon, it was like the whole neighborhood had gotten the memo. We became this ragtag team of garden warriors. Old folks, young folks, people who'd never even spoken to each other before, all working side by side, getting dirty, laughing, sharing lemonade. Mrs. Chen taught us a Chinese proverb about patience. Mr. Patterson told terrible jokes that made us groan. Tommy complained about his girlfriend. It was beautiful chaos. And that garden, oh honey, that garden came roaring back to life like a phoenix made of vegetables. The tomatoes stood up proud. The beans produced like they were showing off. And by August, we had so much zucchini that people started locking their car doors so nobody could sneak any more onto their seats. That's an actual thing people did. Zucchini terrorism was real. Mrs. Kowalski cried happy tears every single day. She made us pierogi, golubki, those are stuffed cabbage rolls that taste like a hug from the inside, and enough food to feed an army. Her kitchen became neighborhood headquarters. Mr. Kowalski got a little better, not healed, but better, enough to sit in a chair by the window and watch us work. He couldn't talk much, but the smile on his weathered face said everything. You could see in his eyes that he understood. His garden had grown something bigger than vegetables. It had grown community. He passed away that October when the leaves were turning colors, but he got to see his garden thrive one last time. He got to know his wife wouldn't be alone. He got to see that the seeds he'd planted, both the ones in the ground and the ones in people's hearts, would keep growing. At his funeral, Mrs. Kowalski gave each of us a little paper envelope.
Inside were seeds she'd saved from the best plants of that summer. She said, "You plant these in your own gardens. You remember that love grows when we share it." Pulls out an old envelope from pocket. I still have descendants of those seeds today, 60-some years later. Every summer when I pick my tomatoes, I think of the Kowalskis. I think of being 10 years old and not knowing I was supposed to wait for permission to do good. So here's what this old lady learned, and what I hope you'll take with you. You don't have to wait for someone to ask before you help. You don't need permission to be kind. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is notice what needs doing and just do it. Even if your knees get dirty, even if you're scared, even if you're just 10 years old or just one person. My grandpa was right. A good neighbor doesn't wait for the storm to pass. And Mama was right when she'd say, the smallest act of kindness is worth more than the grandest intention. Though between you and me, I think my real superpower that summer was being too young and dumb to know that gardens were adult business. Sometimes not knowing the rules is exactly what the world needs. Don't let anybody tell you you're too young, too old, too anything to make a difference. That garden taught me that when we give without expecting anything back, we plant seeds in people's hearts. And those seeds, they grow into gardens of their own.
Now, before you run off to go save the world or at least water somebody's petunias, do 3 things for your old grandma. First, hit that subscribe button. I've got more stories than I have wrinkles, and trust me, that's saying something. Every week, I'm sharing life lessons that you won't find in any school textbook, but you'll definitely need when life gets complicated. Second, smash that like button so hard your thumb gets a workout. It tells YouTube that old ladies getting life advice is exactly what the internet needs more of. Plus, it makes me feel popular, and at my age, I'll take it. Third, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe someone who's waiting for permission to do something good. Maybe someone who thinks they're too small to make a difference. Or maybe just someone who needs to remember that kindness is never wasted. And leave me a comment. Tell me about a time you helped someone without being asked. Or tell me I'm crazy. I can take it. At my age, I've heard it all.
Remember, darlings, don't wait for someone to ask you to do good. Be the person who shows up. Be the person who pulls the weeds. Be the person who plants seeds of kindness. The world needs more people like that 10-year-old girl I used to be, before I knew better, when I just knew what was right. Now go make your grandma proud, and don't forget those cookies we're making later. These hands need your steady young ones. Until next time, keep growing your own gardens, my darlings, both the ones in the ground and the ones in your hearts.